One take, Andy. We're going to wing it. It's fine. It is what it is. What's up, my Nimbugs? Your boy Coder here from the Elestrals, and if you clicked on today's video, you are here because you are wondering, what should I buy to get into Elestrals? With base set first edition right around the corner, it's a big question a lot of people have on their minds, people that are trying to get into the game, and I decided to make a little bit of a guide to try to help you guys figure out what you should be buying if you're interested in getting started with Elestrals, and what basically you should be putting your money into depending on which deck you're trying to build. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at the top 4 decks in the game: Earth Beatdown, Thunder Nexus, Penterror Wind Toolbox, and Fives, and determine basically what the minimum amount you're going to have to purchase in terms of product in order to build those decks. So without further ado, let's get into it. So if you guys are looking to pick up base set first edition, it's coming right around the corner, and when you do, if you're trying to build Earth Beatdown, here's what you're going to need. So for the Earth Beatdown deck, which is my personal favorite deck in the game currently, the very basics of what you're going to need is actually not that easy to acquire. You're going to need 2 Centaurbor starter deck, 1 Penterror starter deck, and some singles from the booster boxes. Specifically, I'm talking about Viserys. The Earth deck really doesn't function without Viserys in the deck. It's probably the only deck in the game that I would argue absolutely needs Viserys in order to function, just because Viserys being in Earth is just part of your engine. Here's a list that I would recommend. It's very basic. Place 3 of all your necessary Earth cards, which is why you're picking up 2 Centaurbor starter decks, is specifically because you want to have a playset of that Echolinks, playset of that Tictorus, playset of that Earthquake, that Demeter, that Foley Forest, and specifically the Poison-Tipped Arrow. Very powerful counter rune in the game right now, as well as the 1 Penterror starter deck, specifically in order to get the Astrabbit, the Elechiks, because Elechiks really good to grab your Demeter, and the Resting on Your Laurels, very strong card, and these are cards that will make it so that your strategy is more consistent. So there's a couple of cards that you're seeing in this list, such as the Boombat, the Sorlet, that you don't typically see in an Earth list, and the reason why these are here are specifically to fill out the spots that you would normally fill out with, like, your playset of Elechik, your playset of Astrabbits, for example. So if we're looking on the way to optimize the deck, you can pick up a 2nd Penterror starter deck in order to get your 3rd Elechik, your 2nd Astrabbit, more Resting on Your Laurels, complete your playset of Tsunamis. Very powerful cards that would fill out those spots very nicely and add more consistency to your deck. Otherwise, if you really want to optimize it as well, I would strongly suggest picking up 1, maybe even 2 of the Trifernal starter deck, and the specific reason why is because that deck has Gorgon's Gaze, which is currently the most powerful counter rune in the game. So this is going to be a little bit of a reoccurring theme. The Trifernal starter deck, frankly, is not that great. It doesn't have very many good cards in there that other decks other than fire decks specifically are going to need. However, it is the only way to acquire Gorgon's Gaze currently. So if you're looking to get Gorgon's Gaze, you can either try to find them on the secondary market, but I'll let you know they're not easy to find, or you're going to want to pick up 1 or 2 of the Trifernal starter deck in order to get 2 or even round out your playset of the Gorgon's Gaze for pretty much every deck that I'm going to be pointing out today. So provided that you do end up going for that those Trifernal starter decks and getting the additional Penterror starter deck, this is what your list would look like. You round out your playsets of Shield, you round out your playsets of the Poison-Tipped Arrows, the Gorgon's Gazes. This is basically an optimal Earth Beatdown list. This is my list, my personal list that I play on the regular, and you can get to this simply with all of those starter decks that I named before and a couple of singles from the booster box. So if you do choose to buy some booster boxes, you will pull some good stuff in order to go into the Earth deck, specifically Shield of Achilles and potentially Viserys. Moving on to the next deck on this list, if you're looking to build the Thunder Nexus deck, a deck that a lot of players are considering to be best deck in the game right now, in terms of mandatory purchases, in terms of the starter decks, you are absolutely going to need 2 copies of the Imperial, the Thunder starter deck, and 1 copy of the Penterror starter deck. Just this is going to give you your absolute basics that you're going to need. The 2 Imperial starter decks gives you 3 Zeus, 3 Shield of Achilles, 3 Toxion, and pretty much every Thunder card you're going to need, with the exception of Elechik, which is why we're grabbing the 1 Penterror starter deck, because the Penterror starter deck not only gives you 2 Elechik, but it also gives you 2 Resting on Your Laurels, very generic card that's very powerful, 2 Aeolus, 2 Pigas, 2 Sorlet, and 2 Tsunami, which are all good toolbox options that you can use. With just 2 Imperial starter deck and the 1 Penterror starter deck, you can make this list here. And I'll be honest, this list is very nice. Now, is it an optimal Thunder Nexus list? Not by any means, but is it a very playable list that I would genuinely feel okay learning the game with, and is probably strong enough to take a lot of games off of fully constructed decks? absolutely. This deck list is actually like kind of nice, and I genuinely think that this is super, super playable. If you're just trying to go with 3 starter decks to go, you grab the 2 Thunder, grab the 1 Wind, you can build this list, and this list is frankly extremely playable, very, very good for getting into the game. But if you like the deck and you want to maximize your Thunder Nexus build and you want to take it all the way to the next level, here's where things get a little bit dicey. You won't have those Gorgon's Gazes or those PTAs. If you want, you can try to find them on the secondary market, but again, difficult. If you want to guarantee have them, you need 1 or 2 of the Trifernal and the Centaurbor starter decks, specifically because those cards are 2 ofs in each of those starter decks. The other reason why this is a little bit dicey to build is specifically because Thunder Nexus is a deck that utilizes Viscerus and Altar of Stars. Now, I would argue Viscerus is not mandatory in the deck, even if you're playing it fully constructed, but Altar of Stars is the star of the show. No joke. This is the best card in the deck, and this is a card that is exclusive. It is a foil exclusive to the booster box. The base set first edition is the only way you're going to be getting your hands on Altar of Stars, and they're hard to find. Even on the secondary market, they're very difficult to pick up. But this is the chase card that you're going for if you're trying to build the Thunder Nexus deck. By all means, you don't need a whole ass booster box for it, but the additional thing you can keep in mind when opening for the Thunder Nexus, if you're opening a booster box, is that you also have the opportunity to pull Voltempest and Gryph-use, which lets you pivot from standard Thunder Nexus into a bit of a more Voltempest focused build. If you're interested in that, we talked about it in our tier list, so go check out that video. But in general, if you're opening the booster box, there are a lot of good cards that you can pull for the Thunder Nexus deck. So if you're looking to get 1 or more booster boxes, I would advise it if you are interested in building the Thunder Nexus deck. Moving on to the Penterror Wind Toolbox deck. This is the deck that you can build with the absolute least amount of sealed product. Let me get into it. For the Penterror Wind Toolbox deck, I would advise that you would buy 2 Penterror starter and 1 Imperial starter. However, if you're only in the market to buy 2 starter decks, you can build this deck with 1 Penterror starter and 1 Imperial starter. In your Penterror starter deck, you'll get pretty much every wind card that you need. The only reason why I would suggest getting a second Penterror starter deck as well is just because if you get 1, you're going to have 2 ofs rather than 3 ofs, so your deck is just going to be a little bit less consistent. So you'll see on this list that you have the full Penterror line, the standard Thunder stuff like the Ash Rabbits, the Elechiks, you have your Earthquakes for toolbox. The only thing that you'll notice that looks a little bit weird is like you have your Boombats in here and stuff like that, and you have 3 Nectar of the Gods, which you wouldn't typically be wanted to be playing, and you have the 2 Thunderstorm. This is to circumvent the fact that you only have 2 P-Gust. Like I said, if you get 2 of the Penterror starter deck, you'll have 3 P-Gust, you'll have 3 Sorlet, you'll have 3 of the Elechik, so you can round out those like playsets and make your deck significantly more consistent. I will be completely honest, this is probably the best deck that you can be playing if you're on a budget of 2 to 3 starter decks. This list is probably the best that you can make with a budget of 2 to 3 starter decks, so I would strongly recommend this if you're looking for a very low investment way to get into the game. This is the lowest investment that you can make in order to be playing a list that I would argue is consistent and strong. But keep in mind, I argued that if you get 2 Wind, 1 Thunder, you have this deck super playable with complete playsets of a lot of the things that you need. But if you also look back at what I suggested for Thunder Nexus deck was 2 Thunder, 1 Wind. So realistically, if you pick up 2 Thunder, 2 Wind, then you have the option of playing Thunder Nexus, and then you can pivot over to Penterror, you know, a little bit of more versatility in what you're able to build. Now, if you're trying to optimize this deck, there's actually a good amount of things that you can do. You can pick up some booster boxes in order to get Altar of Stars. Frankly, this deck doesn't absolutely need it as much as Thunder Nexus does. If you only get the 1 Penterror starter deck, you can complete your P-Gust and Sorlet playsets because those cards also come in the base set. However, you can also go for, like I said, the 1 or 2 Trifernal starter decks and the 1 or 2 Centaurbor starter decks in order to get your Poison Tip Terrors, your Gorgon's Gazes. Standard stuff. These cards are really good, and you kind of need them in every deck if you're going to go all out. And last but not least, this is the deck that I think, in my opinion, is the weirdest to build in terms of what sealed product you need to get. However, it is a deck that is the quite literally easiest deck to play in the game, the easiest deck to learn the basics of the mechanics of the game with, and if you're going for all of these other starter decks that I've recommended, or all of these other decks that I've suggested that you build, you're pulling for a lot of these things already. So this deck that I'm talking about is Fives, and Fives is basically a deck that revolves entirely around playing Elestrals that just have large attack. It's a very, very basic beatdown deck, and the thing with it is that it plays Elestrals and Spirits from all sorts of different elements. And the reason why that's interesting is specifically because of what you need to get in order to play this deck. I've written down that what is mandatory to play this deck is you need 1 Penterror starter, 1 Trifernal starter, 1 Imperial starter, and a Majesea starter. And I know what you're thinking, like, Coder, You're telling me that I can build Penterror for 2 starter decks and I can only build this with 4? Realistically, the answer is yes. However, keep in mind, I've been telling you this whole time that you kind of need the Trifernal starter deck in order to get the Gorgon's Gazes for other decks. If you get one, boom, you have it for this. Then I've told you that you need 1 Penterror, 1 Imperial starter in order to build the Penterror list. And then if you have that, boom, you have those for this deck as well. And then all you're missing is the 1 Majesea starter deck. So if you are going to try to like optimize a Penterror list, then once you get all the stuff to optimize a Penterror list, all you got to do is get 1 Majesea starter deck and you're also able to build this deck. It does give you that extra little bit of versatility at the cost of just 1 additional starter deck based on what you have already been purchasing to build other decks. I would not suggest going straight into the game being like, I want to build 5s. I will buy 1 of every starter deck. That's probably not the best idea you could ever have, but I think if you're already going for other decks and you choose like you want to have that versatility to potentially play something else down the line, picking up the 1 Majesea starter deck in order to have that versatility isn't a bad option. So with 1 of each of these 4 starter decks, so this is without the Earth starter deck. The Earth starter deck actually doesn't give too much. You can build a list that looks a little something like this. So the big thing that this list is missing is Viserys. The big thing with this deck is that you want to play every Elestral that is essentially 5 attack, and Viserys is the like de facto 5 attacker because yeah, it's 4 attack, but it buffs itself up to 5, and it is one of those cards that gives you a lot of advantage. If we're looking at optimizing the 5s list, you are going to want to pick up booster boxes just to get staples and stuff like that, or if you can again find Viserys on the secondary market, but not easy to find. Otherwise, you want to pick up 1 or 2 of the Centaurbor starter deck, and then you can pick up additional copies of the starter decks that you've already got just in order to complete playsets. Because if you look at what an optimized list looks like, looks a little something like this, and you'll notice that we have a lot of playsets here. Sorlet would require that you get a second Penterror starter deck. Playset of Galaxy would require that you get a second Majesea starter deck, and then obviously the poison tipped arrows, the Gorgon's Gazes, these counter runes are really, really strong in this deck. So you would want to pick up like a second fire, 1 to 2 earth starter decks just in order to have those playsets rounded out. So I think this is one of the decks that if you're pulling directly for this is going to be a little bit more on the expensive end. However, this is a deck that is fun to play. It's super fun. It's easy to play. It wins some games, and you don't need to full optimize it. You can make all sorts of different variations of 5s depending on what product you actually end up pulling. So that is something to consider, is if you do pull 2 Penterror starter deck, 1 water, 1 fire, like you can make stuff with that. You don't necessarily have to go with the list that I'm giving you here. 5s is a deck that is unbelievably versatile and just lets you play good, big, like powerful cards and just run all of them in one deck and just send it with that. So with that, that is the official Elestronauts stamped seal of approval buying guide. If you're interested in picking up any of this product once base set first edition comes out, which is right around the corner, you'll be able to play any of the following decks. Like I said, my biggest recommendation, if you want the absolute minimum investment required, pick up 1 Wind, 1 Thunder, and you can play the Penterror deck. Absolutely no problem. It won't be optimized, but it'll be pretty strong. That is probably my suggestion if you're looking for the least investment required in order to get into the game. However, every single one of the decks that we've shown on this list is super playable. So if you are looking to pick up any of these other decks, they're all very, very good possibilities and very good decks to start in the game with. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!